Welcome to the Dental School Guide podcast, your ultimate destination for all things dentistry. I'm Dr. Tanner Townsend, your guide through the complex world of dental education. Join us as we uncover the secrets of acing dental school admissions, navigating residency programs, and exploring career opportunities. Please share and enjoy. Real quick, just wanted to make all you pre-dental students out there aware of a resource. If you've ever been worried about getting into dental school or are wanting to get into that school of your dreams, then you definitely want to check out a program called Dental School Guide. In the program, we walk you through how to save money, time, and heartache when applying to dental school. There's so much fluff out there when it comes to resources for getting into school, and we are streamlining all of that. With our comprehensive digital course, expert mentorship, and personalized application review services, you'll have everything you need to stand out to admission committees. Take advantage of this amazing resource that will help you increase your chances of getting into dental school. You'll want to check out dentalschoolguide.com. Check it out. Welcome back to the Dental School Guide podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tanner Townsend, and today we have Nicole with the admissions team at the University of Colorado with us today. Nicole, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Well, we are super excited to have you on, but first and foremost, tell us a little bit of background about yourself and your role with Colorado.
Absolutely. My name again is Nicole Dole. I am the Associate Director of Admissions and Student Affairs here at the University of Colorado School of Dental Medicine. I was born and raised in Southern California, attended Loyola Marymount University. I was a D1 athlete while I was there, and then after undergrad, I lived in Hawaii for 5 years. And that's where I fell into higher ed, specifically admissions and student affairs. And I've been in Colorado for about 10 years, at CU for 3.
Okay, wonderful. Well, walk us through kind of what your role is at the school and how you help with admissions and recruiting and all that jazz.
Absolutely. So my role at the school, what my team does is we do everything from prospective students, kind of just figuring out dentistry, what does that look like? We advise students on what should you do to be a competitive applicant, and then we run the admissions cycle. We also run student engagement, so we run all clubs, organizations, and premier events, so white coat, banquet, graduation. So my favorite part of our team here at CU is that once we get a student in our program, we get to keep them for 4 years, meaning engaging with my team. So unlike some other programs where you know the admissions team and then you kind of get passed off, they're still very much engaged with us, and so that's probably one of my favorite things about the aspect of how we do admissions and student affairs at CU.
Oh, that's really nice. Yeah, I went to VCU, and yeah, as soon as you're past admissions, you like never see those people ever again.
Yeah.
So that's
Yes,
kind of
it's
nice that
sad
you
for
follow them
us
through.
on this end because you pour so much time into these students and then you're like, oh, on to the next. So it's nice that once we fall in love with them as a candidate and we know they're coming, we get to still engage with them for 4 years.
Oh, that's great. Okay, well, we want to give this opportunity for you to tell us more about Colorado. There's so many wonderful things about the University of Colorado, but what makes Colorado's School of Dentistry unique compared to other schools in your eyes?
Yeah, I think there's 4 major things that really set us apart. The first thing that's kind of the crown jewel for us is our ACTS program, our Advanced Clinical Training program, which our 4th-year students complete, where they go out into the community, work with all federally qualified health centers in the state, so both rural and Denver Metro, and they're seeing about 6 patients a day. And so it's really letting them feel like they are a provider completely on their own with oversight from a preceptor, but it kind of gets them into that swing of what more of a clinic setup is going to look like versus just seeing 2 patients a day like traditional dental schools do morning and afternoon. So that's a big one. It really gives our students confidence in their abilities and shows them like, yes, I am prepared to be a general practitioner when I leave. So I would say that. The second thing is technology. I feel like we do a very good job of integrating technology and we're consistently looking at how can we expand with AI and what does that look like. So 2 of the big things that we have right now is our DASH, which are dental advanced stimulation hubs. We use AI and avatars to kind of bridge the gaps between what students know didactically, their hand skills, and then kind of that patient interaction, right? When you're having to learn to do all 3 and connect the dots, it cannot be as smooth as we would like. And so we use avatars that have personalities and dental medical backgrounds instead of radiographs to really simulate what that's going to be like in clinic. We can do same day delivery models. So we have 3D, we can do in-house milling. We can, print dentures. My mouth guard was printed in-house. So there's lots of different things. I think students that really want that technology piece that want to go to private practice, we teach them how it can be utilized. And then the last thing is I think our culture. It's probably one of the biggest selling points for Colorado when students, prospective students speak with current students is this concept of collaboration over competition, that you made it to dental school, the competition is done, you all are going to graduate, become general dentists, and you're here as colleagues to support each other and to create an environment of support and cheering each other on. And I think that's probably one of our greatest assets.
I like it. Couple quick questions. Those you had some interesting points there. With the ACT program, when you have students that are going out into those federally qualified sites, how many weeks are students able to do that during their 4th year? Every school is a little different, and some schools like don't even offer it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, how
So
long are they out there?
it's a total of 18 weeks. You're not doing all
Whoa.
18 weeks at once. So
Okay.
it's your entire 4th year. So how we do it is you go 3 weeks out at a site, and then you
Mm-hmm.
come back home to manage your patient pool here in clinic for 3 weeks. Then you go out again to a new site for 3 weeks. And that's your whole 4th year.
Whoa,
Yes. So it's half of your 4th year is you are physically not on campus.
that's great.
Yes.
That is way good. Okay. That's an awesome little gig. So, in terms of like, I'm sure that you guys help with housing or you have some housing in those areas. Do you guys have like a stipend for those students or do they take their students to have families? Do families go with them? Give us a little bit of background of what that looks like.
Yeah, so AHEC provides the housing. So we work with AHEC and they provide housing. And sometimes, typically, what it looks like is a family, especially in the rural or mountain town communities, are opening up their home to our students, like their basement or something like that. And typically, each ACT site can hold anywhere from 2 to 4 CU students. So they're never going alone. So they'd be living with somebody with their class. If they're not comfortable with that, then AHEC will give them a housing stipend instead to try to find like an Airbnb or something in that region. The housing only works, we only give a stipend or housing if it's a 60-mile radius away or outside from campus. Anything else, the expectation is they will commute.
Okay, that's great. Um, Now you got me really interested with these AI avatar things.
Yeah.
I've kind of heard a little bit of some schools kind of trying to incorporate things like this. It's kind of hard for me to visualize what this looks like. Do you mind diving a little deeper of what that kind of looks like in a clinical setting? Is it like a VR headset? Is it um, like a, like a simulated patient that's on the
Mhm.
8X chair or something like that?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Yeah. So it's all computerized. So I'll kind of give the one for Dash. So in Dash, we have pods, and each pod has kind of like, think of a simulation lab where you do repetition of hand skills, that same setup as far as the mannequin. So there's the mannequin, and then there's going to be a computer screen. Each student in the cohort is going to have a different avatar. So we have 120 front facing avatars. So if I'm avatar Nicole, my avatar is going to pull up and it's going to be a text on the screen. I'm going to say, "Hi, my name's Nicole. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on me." I'm then going to have already had a pre filled out dental and medical evaluation and a set of radiographs. So then the student would have about 4 responses they would select from based off their beginning interaction with me. So let's say I'll do a simulation. So for D1s, we're replicating our expectation for how you communicate with patients. What is our expectation? Let's say a patient shows up late to clinic. I say, "I'm so sorry, I was late to clinic." You're going to have then 4 responses of what you can say. Based off what you select, you're going to get a thumbs up, you got points, or a thumbs down, you're losing points. And the AI will change the conversation based off what you select. I know currently we're trying to, because it's kind of, it doesn't feel as intuitive because you're reading and clicking. We're creating AI that the avatars will have like a voice, and you wear a headset, and the student can then verbally respond. And so that's what we're working on next. But that's what we're utilizing in the dash. So if you see Carrie's on number 3 in the radiograph, you're going to do a full restoration while still having to interact with your avatar on the screen.
Oh. That is very cool.
Yeah.
That's way cool. So each student has one of those built into their sim lab stuff then?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And so this is a secondary simulation space. So we have sim lab in the dental school that's repetition of hand skills, right? Honing those hand skills. And then we have dash in a different building that's really for class and faculty to build out simulations in areas that they think students need to grow prior to clinic and then also kind of when they're in clinic. And so this was our first year launching it in the curriculum. So obviously our D3s and D4s didn't get it. But our goal is to continue using the dash all 4 years.
Wow. That is a really very unique thing that you guys have going. That's really cool. I'm excited to see how that kind of plays out over the next couple of years.
Yeah, this should be really interesting.
In terms of like curriculum, you have that standard curriculum where you're mainly didactic for the first 2 years, and then you're in clinic typically for those last 2 years. What does your process of getting students into clinic look like? How early are students getting into clinic, and what does that typically look like?
Yeah, great question. That's actually very unique to us. Our students start clinic in their second year through something called transition clinic. And so a lot of dental schools, right, we're going to do a month of you transitioning into clinic. We do it for a whole year. And so all of second year, they are prepping to transition to clinic. So October, November timeframe, they're going to do they'll see their first patient. It's not going to be a restoration. That will wait until the spring, but it's going to be either general cleaning typically or deep cleaning. If it's a deep cleaning, faculty will kind of numb them out. And then March is when they're going to do their first restorative patient of their D2 year. So all the curriculum for the second year is a heavy load because we're prepping them for March. Everything we're doing is prepping them for March. And then they'll kind of start getting into the full swing of clinic that summer, second entering third year is when we're going to start transitioning the 4th year's patient pools that just graduated into the uprising third years. So I think that second year really makes them students either love it or hate it, right? The hate it is this is a lot and I have no extra free time and it's like I barely just eat, sleep, dental, that's all I do. But other students really enjoy it because they're like, I'm practicing dentistry. Like I'm actually in clinic, I'm seeing patients, and this is why I chose this field. So I'm glad that we have that piece for second year for them because I think it gives them a little bit of a reprieve from just the grind.
Yeah, that grind second year. So for our school, it was the real bad semester was your winter slash spring semester of D2 year, and it's like, holy heavens, is this ever going to end?
Yeah,
And so that
yeah,
repeat pre during that semester, I'm sure, is really welcomed and nice.
yeah.
In terms of some students that we work with, they say, hey, is there any support from the school? Like, let's say I'm not doing well in a class, or I'm not meeting expectations or my personal expectations. Is there any opportunity for tutoring, mentoring, extra help, things like that, that the school makes sure that all students have access to?
Yes. So there is tutoring. It's peer-to-peer tutoring. So if a student excels in a course, typically Dr. Mediviel will reach out and say, "Hey, do you want to get paid to be a tutor?" And then we have a third year who's a lead tutor, and they're kind of pairing up students that are struggling to the tutors based off courses and things like that. So we have that, and it's very successful. We have an open door policy with faculty. So our faculty is phenomenal. They know these students as people, their passions, their personal lives. And so we have an open door policy all around our building. If the door is open, just come on in. You can chat about whatever you want, class, not class, right? Life doesn't stop when you're in dental school. And I think that's a big piece of this. Sometimes it's not just the curriculum, it's life. And that can kind of take a toll as well. So we do have those things. As far as mentorship, my team does a couple things really strategically. We have something called Connections in Dentistry, where we team up with Organized Dentistry to help recent grads and maybe dentists that are, at the end of their career mentor our students that are
Oh,
looking for that mentorship. And so we have 2 networking nights a year. We kind of teach students like how do I network because it is a skill and what does that look like, especially if I'm more of an introvert. like, how do I just strike off a conversation with anybody? What does that actually look like? So we're pretty intentional about that. Our students really do also dive into faculty that if they, specialists, if they're thinking about specializing in some of those things. But we also do a residency roundup for 3rd years are looking to specialize with organized dentistry, bringing in specialists in and kind of doing 5 minutes at each table. And so we do things because we know that this is a starting place for students and that they need to see somebody that's just done it as kind of a starting point for them when they leave.
Well, that was my next question. You led into that perfectly, so that's great. Um, is there anything else that you feel like we haven't touched on yet with University of Colorado that if you were someone that is going to apply to the University of Colorado or considering applying that you would say, I want this person to know this about Colorado?
I would say what I would want them to know is not something is I think some students come into dental school, right? And they're like, I'm just going to take a step back from doing everything I've ever done. If I was really into
Mm.
service or leadership, I'm just not going to do any of that. Don't do that because you will suffer when you're here. And so what I tell students is you don't have to sign up for 20 things, but sign up for a couple of things and make sure you're still engaged. Because we as human beings don't do well if we just the one thing and that's all we're doing. So I would say take advantage of everything that we offer. If it's you find something that's not for you, that's fine. Try something different. So we have such a welcoming community that there's something for everybody here. And I think that's probably, again, one of my favorite things.
I think it's really easy to kind of be like, this is my life for 4 years, and I'm going to come out of this, and they forget almost who they are if they do
Hmm.
that. So, in terms of application, let's kind of switch gears and talk to dental school application and specifically what applying to Colorado looks like and kind of feels like of what students can kind of expect. Um, what is the ideal avatar student that Colorado is hoping to have come and apply to their school? What are you guys specifically looking for? Is there a couple specific things? Like obviously it's holistic,
Mhm.
but is there anything specifically like we love to see this in applicants that you guys really look for?
Yeah. So probably, I think students get really wrapped into the metrics of dental school. And when we
Mhm.
meet with students, I didn't get into dental school because of my metrics. And it's like, that could be a portion, but I think they forget that they need to be growing as whole people. And so that looks for us like leadership because as a dentist, you're leading a team. And if you haven't done that, if you haven't practiced leadership, the theory of leadership is very different than when you actually apply it. And so making sure you have leadership roles, also making sure you have service. Service is really important to us. ACTS, we're serving the greater Colorado community. We are doing service with high school outreach. There's a lot of service that we do as an institution. And so that's important to us that what you value aligns with our values. I would say the third thing, as far as what we're looking for in the app, is that personal statement. And I think it really gets students down uh, a rabbit hole a little bit of like, what are people looking for? And for us specifically at Colorado, it's address the prompt. The prompt is always something along the lines of why dentistry, and what we get a lot of is a reiteration of their resume or a
Yep.
reiteration of what they've already said on their application. Don't use that space for that. We already saw that. Why are you doing this? And that takes a lot of discernment. It takes a lot of self-reflection to really pull out of yourself of anything I could do in the world, of anything I could do in healthcare. Why is it dentistry for me? And that requires sometimes for some people in their story vulnerability, but vulnerability is how you connect with people. And that's how you're going to connect with the committee member reading your application. So I would say take the personal statement to the next level would be one of my greatest pieces of advice.
Yeah, I think that is a very common problem that I see a lot as well. Of just as you read through these personal statements, they're like, "Holy cow, this is just like you restating your resume over again, or the things that you put in the experience section, just in text, longer text form."
Exactly.
When you say take the personal statement to the next level, what does that look like in your eyes?
I think when I read these personal statements, I think what I see a lot is students who don't know who they are. And I can't tell you who you are, and no dental school can tell you who you are. And so you have to be able to articulate who you are. And that's really hard to do. And so What I tell students typically to do is grab a piece of paper, write down every single reason why you're pursuing dentistry. Nobody has to see it, it's just for your eyes. It could be the noble reasons, some of the vain reasons, and then circle the 3 or 4 common themes that you see, and that's your why. And if you're having a really hard time doing that, that typically tells me you haven't spent enough time with yourself. And again, that discernment process of who am I? Why am I doing this? What population in dentistry am I trying to serve? And if you're still struggling, I recommend reading Simon Sinek's book, It Starts With Why. I think that really helps students of like wrapping their mind around what we're looking for as far as who are you as a person and how do I articulate that in a personal statement.
Yeah. In regards to other aspects of the application, there's like the volunteering section and like we talk about volunteering, extracurriculars, things like that. What are some common things that you like to see in those experiences that a student is
Sure.
having?
So for traditional students or traditional applicants that are coming right out of undergrad, making sure you have leadership roles within the organizations you're involved in, or that's pre-dent, or you're a student athlete and you're on student athletic advisory or fraternity sorority, you have a leadership role. Again, those leadership roles are very important. Again, theory, you can be like, I've read all these books, but theory is very different than application. And so making sure you're aware of how you lead and some of the downfalls that you've faced through that leadership experience. Extracurriculars, I think a lot that I see as I'm in this club, I'm in this club, but being a club member doesn't mean you really have any skin in the game or any buy-in or any decision making process at all. So I would kind of stay clear from that. Don't just list, I was in this club, this club, this club. At that point, it reads like I'm doing this for dental school.
Uh-huh.
And we
Checking
know
the box.
check in the box. And then for service, I think what we see a lot is, and these are not negative things at all, but if you want to differentiate yourself, is we see a lot of I worked at a blood bank or I worked at a food bank. Do something in service that speaks to you. And so what I typically, the example I give to students is I have horses, I do 3-day equestrian eventing, and I have my son's on the autism spectrum. So I would do something in equine therapy because that's easy for me to speak to in an interview of what does my service look like and it ties into who I am versus doing something in service that doesn't really speak to my soul. So being really wise with what you do in service and making sure it speaks to you and that you feel like you're giving back meaningful time to something.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for something that you can actually talk about in an interview. I think it's amazing to see those those experiences where they're checking the box. You can really tell the difference if it's a check the box experience or if it was a meaningful experience to you because it comes out in the way they write it.
Absolutely.
Um, and it's just so just do things that are really meaningful that you connect with personally, I
Yeah,
think is the
that you
best
connect with.
advice for
Yes,
sure.
absolutely.
Okay, let's talk metrics for just a minute though, because this is
Sure.
like one of the things where students are like, but yeah, like
Mhm.
there is a cutoff though, right? And like, it's such
Oh.
a it's a tricky mindset to get around and a kind of a dumb thing. But let's just ask the question to get it out of the way. In terms of GPA and DAT score, does Colorado have a cutoff? Or yeah, how do you guys approach DAT and
Yeah,
GPA? I think we should probably
we
just keep it more broad.
sure, we don't have a cutoff. Now with that said, if you have a DAT on a 12 on the DAT old scoring model, because my brain hasn't converted to new scoring
Yeah,
model
I know
yet,
mine hasn't either.
old scoring model, and you have a 2.8, you need to take a really close look at yourself in the mirror and be like,
Yeah.
do I have a solid foundation to enter a doctoral program? Right?
Mhm.
I think that's what students misunderstand is the GPA and DAT are to the admissions committee. Does this student have a solid foundation to then build upon? If there's cracks in that foundation and we're throwing histology and all this other stuff and we're layering, the whole house is going to crumble. So I would say no. And our average metrics, old DAT scores a 20, which converts to a 420 on the new model. And our average GPA cumulative is about a 3.6. Science is about a 3.6 as well. And so I would remind students that if you have a very high DAT, right, the GPA can be lower because we're like, maybe they didn't apply themselves, but they do have a foundational knowledge. and vice versa. If you have a higher GPA, then the DAT could be slightly lower because then I'm looking at it and going, maybe they're not the best test taker. They have a lot of testing anxiety and some of those things. The other thing I do want to say about metrics, because we do hear of, I'm just not a good test taker, right?
Mm.
There's something called a board that you're going to have to take and
That you're gonna,
licensure.
yeah,
And our biggest fear is if we admit somebody and they haven't, quote unquote, honed their test taking skills, what's going to happen at the end of the program if you can't get licensed nor you pass boards? And so it's really a safety net for students. We would never want to admit a student, have you take on all this debt and not be able to
practice.
practice.
No, I think that is the tricky thing is through school, I think you become a professional at taking tests. You know what
Mhm,
I mean? You're a professional student and like literally a professional at being a student.
mhm.
When you've gone through dental school or medical school or any professional program at that point. But yeah, I think you hit it right on the head of students. You want people to be successful, and you're just trying to use the predictors that you have to ensure success as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, in regards, like, let's say a student doesn't have the track record they need. We know postbacks and master's programs are common tracks to go down for students to show their enhanced skills that they've recently developed. Do you guys have a preference on if a student does a postback or a master's program, and what do you guys typically recommend?
Yes, I typically recommend a master's over a post-bac. And the main reason is the post-bac is essentially an extenuation of undergrad. And you need to prove that you can handle academic rigor at a higher level. And so a master's would show that more clearly. And also a master's in a hard science, because it's typically the science GPA that is hurting. And it's, again, the concern of the foundation. We do have a pathway program with a master's here on the Anschutz campus with the master's in modern human anatomy. And the reason we teamed up with them is because they have those faculty as D1s for body systems, and they also have it for head and neck anatomy D2 year. And that program does full cadaver anatomy. And so we know that that program is truly preparing students for dental school because there's kind of some overlap in courses. And so that's something students can look into. It's called the MHA Pathway to Dentistry at CU Anschutz. If you do that, if you're admitted into that pathway, you have a reserved seat in the dental program for the following year, as long
Is
as
that
you
a
meet
guaranteed seat?
a guaranteed seat with caveats of you have to maintain a certain GPA benchmark in the MHA. You
Hmm.
have to have a 18 on the DAT at minimum to be eligible to apply. And then you have to have a successful dental school interview. And what that means is successful just means we can't see like major red flags. Essentially, the committee can't have two no's. So you don't have to completely like knock it out of the park like a traditional applicant would. But you have to be at a place where we're like, yes, we see the growth. And so that has been very successful for us, and it has been very successful for students that need that extra time to grow, both academically and maybe personally as well.
So is that a 1-year program or a 2-year master's?
So it's technically a 2 year, but they do the first year with the MHA, and then that second year is a capstone project, and they complete that anytime during dental school.
Oh, they complete it during school.
Yeah,
Okay.
and typically a lot of our students do research with faculty on numerous different things, and so typically if they were MHA pathway, they're just going to tag team on somebody's research that they're doing, and they just have to complete it by their 4th year if they want to earn the masters as well.
Okay. That's good to know. And for that program, is it pretty much invite only for that master's program, or is so?
Nope, anybody can apply, but
Okay.
again, for us to even review you, you have to have an 18 on the DAT at minimum to be eligible.
Hmm.
And then we typically have about 45 competitive applicants, and we interview about 16 for the pathway. And then we have 5 seats.
Okay. That's a cool little program you guys have then.
Yeah.
Um, Now let's kind of talk that application review process. Every school handles it differently when
Hmm.
they get that initial batch of applicants. Let's actually back up. I just thought of a question here. Different schools have different opinions on this of when an applicant is early versus late submitting. When is it considered early, and when is it considered to be almost too late in the game to submit for you guys?
Sure. So our app deadline's October 15th. So
Hmm.
I would say late for us is anything past the second week of August
Hmm.
because we're rolling admissions. So as soon as they start to come in, and when you ask me the next question, I can kind of go in through the process. But we typically start sending interview invites the last week of July, and we
Hmm.
start interviewing third week of August, typically. And then at that point, we're interviewing 3 days a week. And so the committee is interviewing. And so, right, file review starts to kind of go on the back end. So if you hit submit October 1,
It's pretty late.
yeah, it's late. You're late. And I understand when students are like, oh, well, I need to retake the DAT and do that. And at that point, my advice is, hey, maybe you just shouldn't apply this cycle.
Save your
It's
money.
save your money. It's not inexpensive to apply to dental school. And then on my end, it makes me feel like we're just taking your money. And so really look at yourself in the mirror and be like, hey, is this the best time? Just because everybody else is doing it and hitting submit doesn't mean you need to be hitting submit. And you want to put your best foot forward because first impressions matter. It's not mean you can't grow, but when you're applying 4 or 5 times and you're not really changing, and you're like, "Oh, I applied because of my DAT," and it just starts to get convoluted. So really look in the mirror and be like, "Is this really the best time for me to apply? Am I the best version of myself right now?"
And sometimes it takes a hard look in the mirror
Yeah,
to say
it
that.
does.
In terms of that application, when those files do come in, what does that review process look like with you guys to determine if someone's eligible for an interview?
Sure. We'll kind of go through the whole thing. So once somebody submits an app, we have to do a basic check. And so what that basic check looks like is, did you pay our supplemental app fee? Do you have minimum 50 shadowing hours? Have all your letters of rec been submitted? And do we have an official DAT score? Those four are good, and you move into the next bucket. The next bucket is checking your prereqs. And again, make sure you read school websites. They all have different prereqs. And we put a question in, if you haven't completed all the prereqs, please tell us your plan to complete these by the end of May of
Yeah.
that
Can I
cycle.
ask you a quick question before you continue on that?
Yeah, sure.
I have seen so many transcripts, and it is so hard sometimes because sometimes, like school, like, like if, let's say, for example, I don't think you guys require microbiology, but some schools require microbiology plus lab.
Mhm.
And sometimes the lab course is built in to the class, but it doesn't say it has lab. Sometimes you can tell by the number of credits, of
Yep.
course, but how do you guys determine? There's sometimes I'm like, I have no idea. This is some random school I've never heard of, and I have no idea if this counts or not.
Yes, so that's a great question. We have another question in the app that says, if you feel like your lab and lecture have discrepancies, more so on the quarter system, I would say, than the semester, please
Mhm.
indicate that here. And so when we're checking those prereqs, if we don't think somebody has articulated their plan to complete it, or we have require C or better in our prereqs, they have a C minus, we're going to send them an email, say your prereqs are incomplete and this is why. And if the student emails us and says, here's my like syllabus and I can clearly see it, then we'll mark it off as complete. If the student doesn't email us back, we're going to say your app is incomplete and you're not going to get reviewed. So that's how we do it. We also have a running list of institutions that have really weird codings for some of their
Uh-huh.
courses. CU Boulder does specifically for bio, UCLA does, right? Like UCLA doesn't do 100, 200, 3. None of the UC schools do. They're like bio 1
Yeah.
or an upper division is a 200 level. And so some of those things. So we have a running list that we triple check before we scare the student that their prereqs are incomplete.
That's good to know. Okay, sorry. You can go back to going
Yeah,
through your application cycle. I got us totally off track there,
no,
but
you're totally fine. So, okay, after those 4 checks, we do the prereq check. And like I mentioned, if you didn't articulate your plan to complete these by May, or we have any questions, we'll put you in another bucket and send you an email. Let's say your prereqs are good. Okay, we're going to move you to pre-review. And that's when I'm going to assign it to members of our admissions committee to start reviewing files. From there, they can put you in multiple buckets. And those buckets are, yes, I would like to interview them. No, like just no. Yes, of like, I don't know, I'm on the fence. And maybe it's, let's see who accepts an interview from us and who doesn't, or recommend for MHA pathway to dentistry, meaning I see potential in this applicant. but I feel like they need more time growing academically or whatever, and they can leave notes. So if you, let's say, get put in the interview yes category, um, we will start sending out interview invites again at the end of July typically. And we have about 3 weeks of dates available in that link that we send those students to then select a date and time that works best for them for their interview.
Okay. And how do you guys format your interview? Every school's different.
Yeah.
Some do multiple mini interviews, some do one-on-one, two-on-one,
Mhm.
students involved in the interview as well. What do you guys typically do, and what are some of the things that you guys focus on in those interviews?
Great. So we do one-on-ones and we do two 25-minute interviews one-on-one. So two individuals from the missions committee are interviewing that candidate. um, because we all see different things in people. And so we don't want just one person making that big decision for that individual. So our day kind of looks like we don't have students involved in the interview or the decision making process. We do have students involved in the day. So candidates will check in, they'll do a curriculum and financial aid presentation with me. We'll have a faculty panel, student panel, and then they'll have lunch with students, then their interview, and then campus tour. And so that's kind of what our day looks like for them when they're here.
That's great. In terms of like questions, there's and you guys don't have to go into nitty-gritty if you don't want
Sure.
to, but it students do appreciate it. Um, with the interview questions, are you like a open file system? Are you a closed file? And then what kind of questions are you guys typically focusing on to get to know that student better?
So we're closed file. So the only thing that that committee member has is their personal statement. So again, this is why I harp on the personal statement. My little slogan is the personal statement will get you the interview if you have benchmark metrics, right? And the interview is going to get you into dental school. And so some of those questions, we have a list of things they can ask, but we really leave it up to our committee. We want it to be conversational. So we don't say like you have to ask this question, you have to ask that question, but I'll give you some that I ask. A standard one is tell me what you feel like is the greatest issue facing the field of dentistry. And so, right, we're going to get a lot of access to care issues. We're going to get costs of dentistry, all those things. But I think what students need to realize is I'm asking you what an issue is. Don't just come up with this is the issue. You better have a way to solve it. And your solution doesn't have to be like accurate, but it tells me like you least critical think and thought about some of these issues in the field you want to go into versus telling me something I already know. So I would say make sure you're going deep and not just giving surface responses. The other thing in the interview is we're trying to get to know you. Like we liked you on paper. And so do we feel like you're going to be a fit for CU? And again, that collaboration piece is really important to us. Kind of my trigger point with candidates is when I sense a air of arrogance or
Mm.
sense an air of entitlement. For me, that's a big hard no because it tells me you're not coachable. And if we can't coach you and train you, why are you here? So putting your best foot forward, I think not having memorized responses to things because you sound like a robot, but you need to come in with confidence and kind of my four pillars for an interview. What I tell candidates when I'm trying to help coach them, if they schedule an advising appointment, is you need to have confident body language. You need to have a compelling story, which means you know who you are and I can articulate that. You have to have strategic connection, which means you have to connect with the individual interviewing you. And then the last one, oh, I just blanked. Body language. It'll come to me in a second. I totally blanked.
No, you're
So
good.
I'm like, oh, there we go. Polished communication. I was like, what's my little order? Polished communication. And so I think sometimes students go, the most important thing is polished communication. I'm like, wrong. It's not.
No.
Connecting with the person that interviewed you, because that is the person that when that door is closed in a decision meeting is the one that's going to fight for you or not fight for you.
Yeah, if they have no connection to fall back on, it's just gonna
Yep.
disappear.
Yep.
This is another common question that I get of like, "Oh, what do I do if I don't get in on decision day? Like if I don't hear
Mhm.
in December, Colorado's my school that I want to go to. What can I do, if anything?" And I think um What we typically try to focus on is you're not out of the game yet, if you still want to go there, but we need to be respectful. What is your typical advice for someone in that situation?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I'm totally fine with you emailing letters of intent, but be strategic and smart about what you're writing in those letters. Don't just like 20 pages of like, I'm doing this. And don't do more of the I'm doing, right? Articulate why is this a fit for me and how am I going to benefit the institution? So two pieces there. The other thing I would say is specifically for Colorado, until you get a denial letter from us, you're not out of the game. And remembering that we're waiting on other people that are probably getting into multiple programs. And then we're going to send out phase 2 of admittance. And so at that point, if you didn't get in, being really, again, clear with yourself as what are my top schools? And if I'm sending a letter of intent, that means if I'm getting in, I am coming. I'm not playing pitting school against school, because schools, we all talk. I know my colleagues at other schools. And when students do that, we know. And it doesn't bode well for you when you do start dental school, because they already have a negative connotation that your word doesn't mean anything. And so if you're doing a letter of intent, don't be sending it to multiple schools. Like, you need to be really honest with yourself of, if I get in here, I'm coming.
I think that is great advice. I've even had some deans say, I don't like letter of intents. I don't know. When I applied to school, that was not a thing. I feel like that's something new in the last like 5-10 years that is kind of popped up that is kind of different.
Yeah, I think for me, I like it because it tells me that student that I was maybe not sure about, that I was like, oh, I don't know,
Hmm.
like this kid from New York, are they really going to come? Did we
Uh,
like them as much as they liked us, right? And that really shows me, oh no, they still are in the game. Like, they really still do want to be here. So it doesn't really take me, like, no skin off my back to read the letter, right? And
yeah,
so I'm okay with it. I just think, again, you need to be smart, because if it's just 20 pages, I'm going to breeze it
yeah,
versus being intentional with what you're saying.
yeah, and being short and concise. I like that a lot. Well, do you have any, Nicole? This has been wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. Do you have any final pieces of advice for students that are looking to apply to the University of Colorado in this upcoming cycle?
Piece of advice specifically for CU. I don't necessarily think there's anything specific for CU, but I think the end of the day, the two biggest pieces of advice I would give students is know yourself. Again, I'm going to get on that, harp on that again. Do the self work. Like, you need to do the self work before you come to dental school. And being really honest with yourself can sometimes be painful, but it doesn't mean you can't grow, and it doesn't mean you can't be a better version of yourself. So I would do the self work. And I would also remember every interaction you have with somebody at CU, whether it's a student, whether it's somebody at the front desk, somehow gets back to me. And so being courteous, being kind, like, check your ego at the door and recognize that you may be all that in a bag of chips. But if you show up like that, your likelihood of getting admitted into any dental program is going to be very slim. So be kind to everybody, and spend some time looking in the mirror.
Hey, I love it. That is some excellent advice. Well, Nicole, thank you once again for coming on the podcast today. We've really enjoyed having you, and thank you for all the listeners that are able to learn a little bit more with us about Colorado. So thank you once again.
Thank you. It was a great time.
Awesome. We will catch you all in the next episode. See you next time. That's all for today's episode of the Dental School Guide podcast. We hope you've gained valuable insights and inspiration to fuel your journey into dentistry. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more expert advice, inside tips, and engaging discussions. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review. It would mean the world to us. Until next time, keep smiling, keep striving, and remember, your dental dreams are closer than you think. Thanks for tuning in to the Dental School Guide podcast.